Okay, so thanks for staying the course, the final session of the day. What we want you to do is to get you to actually look at each other's CVs, taking on board what you've learned today from all the sessions. I think you will have picked up some tips already, and I'm just going to do a short presentation on writing an academic CV. Most of this is very common sense, but it's an opportunity to sort of give tips along the way. And you can really Google a lot of this. There are lots of examples of really good CVs already on the website. But basically, can I just, before I start that, can I just check how many of you have actually brought along a CV? Great, so this will work. That's good, you've all brought one along. Okay, so just sort of a very obvious thing, what's the difference between a resume and a CV? So a resume is like a summary of your qualifications, experience and skills for any job, okay? But a CV is an academic CV, so this is specifically includes things that are relevant for an academic career, like teaching and research experience and your publications. So what are hiring panels or promotion committees, if you're already in that job, what are they looking for when they look at your CV? So Parveen mentioned earlier that obviously when you apply for a job, a CV is only one part of the process. You submit a CV and a covering letter. Sometimes you will also be asked to do an online application as well. So just, be aware of what the different sort of functions are. The letter of application is the kind of narrative about you. Okay, so that's where you get to talk about and highlight your key skills. And I just want to talk about the kind of role of the CV in the job application process. And my colleagues may have things to add here, but I've just sort of come up with sort of 6 key things that I think a CV does, really. So first of all, it gives a sense of who you are and your accomplishments. So I think Praveen also mentioned this, that you don't just say what you've done, you find a way to highlight where you've gone sort of above and beyond, where you can highlight your strengths, what you've achieved. So you use your CV to highlight the kind of impact that you've had, and where you can sort of quote numbers or more qualitative data, or where you've made a change. It's an opportunity to do that. So clearly it's a summary of your relevant skills, experience and qualifications for the role. So whatever the job application asks for, you should make sure that you've covered those key points in your CV. And there's a key tip there, which I hope most of you are already practicing, is that, tailor your CV. Don't just submit the same CV to every job. You might need to move the order around. If it's a teaching job that you're applying for from your PhD, then put your teaching experience higher up on the CV. If it's a research post, then move your research section up on the CV. It's calling me. So the order and that's coming in the next one. I'll come back to that. But it's also an opportunity for you to demonstrate what additional value you will bring. So you can go beyond the kind of job description and add in things where you've done voluntary work that might not seem relevant to that particular academic post, but you can flag some kind of transferable skills from the work that you've done and pitch them at what's being asked for in the job application, so you can bring something kind of additional. One thing I do want to stress from being on selection panels is that the CV plays a really important role in evidencing your claims. So often what you find is that there's the narrative and somebody is saying, I've got all this experience of grant application, I brought in substantial grants, what a panel will then do is look at your CV to see, okay, were you the lead researcher on that grant application? How much was the value of that grant application? So you can create an impression with the narrative, but the CV is where the panel will look for the evidence of how substantial was that, how substantial was your contribution. We talked about authorship. You know, if you are saying, I have published 30 pieces, and yet you're the last named author on each one of those, you know, that's where the panel can sort of make a kind of a slightly different judgment. There may be, you know, the issues we talked about earlier, but they'll want to see that that it matches what you've said in your letter of application. So try to be very, I guess there's a sort of balance to be struck. You need to flag your achievements, but you need to also keep it focused and real. So it's really important to make sure that you don't overact things, but at the same time use the opportunity to detail the things that you've done. So for example, if you've been asked to review an article as an early career researcher, and you put, even if it's, you know, a fairly not so well-known journal, it might be something that you've got involved in your institution with other PhD students, list those things, you know, put those kind of things in your CV, because it's an example of reviewing. So search for those kinds of things that you could mention that help evidence your claims. So as I said, it's balancing. Avoid sort of vague statements, but give as much detail as possible, but do it concisely. So make sure that you are giving page numbers when you cite publications. I've seen many CVs that will show 10 publications. When you Google them, you find that a number of them are like 2 pages long. Okay, so what you don't want to do is frustrate a selection panel, sort of having to go and do that work. Put that information in, say how many pages. If there's a DOI number, make sure you put that in and be consistent. That's the main thing in terms of presentation. Be very consistent in the presentation of your CV. So I don't know if colleagues, you want to add anything at this point? Oh, okay, so most institutions have a standard CV template, and if you don't know about your own institution's templates, it's really good to find that out. Thank you. What we will give you when you move on to the tables is an example of Goldsmiths, just to see what one looks like. If you haven't seen one before, you may well be very familiar with your own institution's template already. But if you're going to stay in an institution and apply for promotion, you'll be expected to use that CV template. When you apply for jobs elsewhere, then you can use any format that you want. It's not expected that you will use that institution's format. You just use a clear, consistent format for your CV, and that's why it's really important to think about the presentation and the structure. Don't, you know, not to overcrowd it, but also not to leave it so that there's very little information on as well. So do pay attention to any guidelines on formatting the CV when you get the job description, and in particular things like font size. So most institutions will not want anything sort of below 10, a font size of 10. Ideally 11 should be the smallest that you go, because otherwise it gets really difficult to read. And I've seen some letters that are very small, especially when they've been given a page limit. You find people writing and the margins get smaller. You know, get somebody to read it and edit it down. Don't submit anything that's just unreadable. Don't make it difficult for the panel. The other thing to look out for is whether they want it to be chronological order in terms of your qualifications, your publications, or reverse chronological order. If it's not If it's not specified, then I would say go reverse chronological.
I can't hear, sorry.
Go with,
It's
is it the microphone?
This one's on as well. That one.
Okay, I can hold it. Can you hear me now?
No.
Can you hear me now? Okay, that's the one that's happening. It's sort of, I have to hide behind here so you can't see me. So,
You can actually push it down.
hey, that's better. Okay, so I would say reverse chronological order so that you put your most recent achievements first, unless you're asked to do it the other way round. And for some parts of an online application, we'll ask you to do some CV, particularly your qualifications, your education. You might be asked to do that as part of an electronic form. So just really check what the institution is asking you to do. So we will give you an example of an institutional format. Here's another one. This is just to give you an idea of how another institution asks their academics to set out. And they have a very brief requirement. So all academics in that institution are asked to do is just do 4 things: the contact details, their appointments. Then there's a section called Other Details of Career, and that's where they have to fit all of the research achievements in. So each institution will have a kind of a different sort of template. And then you've got your publications. But if you look across most institutions, okay, they will ask for, I'll come back to that one, they'll ask for these are the things that most institutions will expect you to include in your CV. So your name and contact details at the top, very, very clearly. You're not required to provide a summary or profile, which is, where you say, this is what my strengths are, this is my research topic, this is, I'm generally a vibrant, energetic individual, I'm a go-getter. There's a short, people often have a little statement that summarizes them. If anyone has got one that's worked up, it would be great to hear what you've put in there, but you will be sort of looking at each other's to see what you've put there. But make sure that reflects what's in the rest of the CV. Donna?
What is your view on people putting photographs in their CV?
Yeah, that did come up, yeah. So,
that's old testament, yeah.
I mean, I tend to see it, it's interesting, I think I tend to see it more with early career researchers, and then people stop putting them as you move up. So that's interesting. So there must be something that equates it with sort of seniority and seriousness. I don't think panels really mind. I would say probably...
It's not standard
It's
here.
not.
It's standard on the continent, but it's not here. It's not really. You're never really expected or asked to put a photograph on your CV.
No,
Or even your date of birth, actually.
Yes, that's the other one.
It's an equality issue.
Yeah. So you don't need to put your date of birth, and I think some institutions on the electronic form will ask you, but most these days will not make that question compulsory anymore. Likewise with ethnicity, with gender identity, they don't make these compulsory anymore.
Those questions are usually for ethnicity monitoring for human resources, so they don't form part of your application per se. Human resources will keep those to track how the institution is doing in attracting underrepresented groups to interview and to appointment.
But the interesting thing that happened to me last month, I reappointed somebody to a role
And then I got a photograph, and HR said, to me, is this the person you interviewed?
Oh.
So that's never happened before, but that is quite interesting. They made us put in so it's not on the CV, but after the interview and we appointed, there were references, and then there was this email to me. Here is she, that's the name, that's what we've got from her, it's the person that's sending
People conducting interviews.
somebody else, maybe. So it was her, I mean, we don't know.
So I think you've got this. This is all fairly straightforward. This is your education qualifications. Obviously, your present post will be your student, your PhD, and whatever, whether it's self-funded, whether it's not funded. I would put down because it can matter. If you're doing it self-funded, it's often the panel will be impressed that you've gone through that process. And likewise, if it's funded, they'd want to know who's funding it, over what period, so put the details in.
So in terms of your previous appointments in education and qualifications, how far back do you go?
Yeah, so that's interesting. I would keep it, if it's a research post, I would keep it to the kind of more academic posts. But if there are transferable skills that you can mention from other kinds of jobs, I would list those. What you want to avoid doing is putting a lot of gaps in your CV. So explain any gaps. So where you haven't been working for a period of time, make sure that you explain the reason for those gaps, or any voluntary work you might have done in that period, you put that in as well.
Say if the reason for the gaps is quite confidential, so say for instance, for example, someone's been to prison, so that's what's warranted the gap, and they don't really want to put it on their CV. How would you go about that?
Yeah, you can just say, I'd be very happy to explain this should I be called to interview. So you could just put a line like that.
Perfect, thank you.
Farzana, I think, one thing going back to what Parveen said is also to include anything that you've done on a citizenship basis, and it's surprising what kinds of things can come out, and they are very important in recruitment. So for instance, if you help with workshops, the PhD seminars, you helped in a conference of some kind, any of these kinds of activities, and there are lots of activities you might be doing in the university. Keep track of them and make sure that you do mention them, because they begin to become quite important at this point, especially because you will be asked a question in interview about what else do you think you'll be able to offer. And then if you're able to say, oh yeah, I have experience in helping organize the PhD seminars, then they know that at the very least you can become the seminar organizer.
Yeah, so PhD seminars, going further back, you may have done open visit days for your institution. You may have led a network, you might have been a staff student on a staff student liaison committee. You may have been asked to do a small task for your department. Put those things down if they're relevant. Make sure that they're relevant and that you can demonstrate what skills you got from doing those roles that sort of address the criteria.
And usually the job description will say what skills they're looking for. So what you want to do is link. It's good to say you were on this committee or that committee, but you have to say these are the transferable skills I've learned, and especially if those skills are listed in the job description that you're actually paying the CV for, or because it's as Farzana said, you sort of shuffle it around depending on the job you're going for. So the actual skills you got may shuffle as well.
So, in terms of education qualifications, how far back do you go?
You don't.
At your O level,
You don't need to. You don't really need to go that far back. If you do get the job though, what the institution might ask for is your certificates. Okay, so just bear that in mind. And particularly the ones that are the kind of essential, like English and maths, if it's relevant to the job. So just be aware of that. But generally, A-levels, I would say, your A-levels and then your first degree. And then as you move up, you say less and less of that. You sort of start with your first degree and your PhD.
I mean, generally in Sheffield, they'll say go back to the last job or the last promotion, and then anything else they want, they'll ask you afterwards. So if it's your very first job, post-doc, you're probably going to want to say something about the degree you got, and then once you've done with the PhD, and maybe other post-doc teaching or research places help. But it just depends.
Yeah. Yeah. I think a good tip that somebody gave me years ago, because sometimes you do things and you don't remember that you've done them. And I kept doing that. I was like, oh yeah, I remember I did that. Oh yeah, I remember I did that. And what the person said to me was that what you need to do is have what was known as a kind of rolling CV. So that every time you do something, you write it down, right? You can fix it up later, right, when you're actually ready to submit it. But every time you do something, so you have the date, the time, when did you do it, you know, and any other notes you have that you just keep putting on this documents that you keep rolling and rolling. And that was the only thing that got me to remember all of the things that I had been doing. Because I've been leaving out so many things that I had done just because I didn't make a note of them and I didn't remember them. So once you start putting them down, in whatever format you have, so it's like a rolling document that you have, and then you can use it, you know, depending.
I think that's a really important point, and I would say the same. I learned from bitter experience that keep your CV live, so whenever you do something, add it, and then for any kind of job, you can take some things out, make a copy and take irrelevant things out, but you know that you've got the dates, you've really evidenced anything that you might need to draw on. And the reason I said I learned from bitter experience was when I applied for my chair position, because I'd been in the same institution for a long time. I hadn't kept my CV up to date, and I was asked at short notice by the dean he said, oh, can you just show me your CV? And then I panicked. And it was such a mess, and I was so embarrassed. And it does take time to really format, you know, particularly when you've got more things than, you know, worked many, many years, you've got more to add. And it was a really embarrassing experience, so that from that I learned my lesson, and I keep a live CV, so I keep adding things as and when I do the new publications, put them on straight away so that you've got the dates. If you do a PhD exams, you know, anything like that, you add them as you go along. And then this is the more kind of academic, you know, the first bit is the general, but these are the more academic aspects of your CV. So they will often expect you to demonstrate that you're a member of an academic community. So are you a member of any associations, bodies, you know, like any societies in your field? Put those down. So I always have, you know, the British Sociological Association. I put the Black Female Professors Forum in that section. So, you know, anything like that you might be part of. It shows that you're actively sort of involved in your academic community. Honours and distinctions. Now, people will write that in different ways. Sometimes they'll say honours and distinctions. Other times it will be awards. It's things like prizes, any fellowships, any, you know, as an undergraduate student, you've had a prize for an essay, mention that. But I wouldn't go any further back than sort of A levels. It's not your primary school play.
Please, I would like to ask that, is there like a group or membership something so that some of us can add this group to our CV and increase?
So, yeah, the Generation Delta PGR network. A national network.
We are junior professors coming out.
Yeah, I mean, that is a national network now. I would certainly, you know, if you are joining that, I would put that, because it demonstrates that you're in touch with people across institutions. Yeah, I don't know, can you think of any other examples of associations, any of you, that you might want to put?
I mean, you should always join the Prime Association for your discipline. The earlier you do that, the better. They will have student rates. So whether it's law or medicine or economics, your disciplinary body will have a professional organisation that you can join. So you should definitely all join those as soon as possible. And once you've joined, then start to think about whether there's any type of role you can play in that association, because leadership, academic leadership is one thing that you want to start demonstrating as early as possible.
One of the things we did when we joined the European Society of Pediatric Radiologists was, this was when I was young, we created the junior subsection, and that's thriving now. That's been going for about 15 years now, maybe 18 years. So we created a junior ESPR, Jessica, and that's something that we can do in yours if nothing exists. Get a few of yourselves, make a group, and get some of the seniors to come and give talks. We've got a slot in the conferences, and that's then you put that in your CV as something that you created it essentially.
Yeah, thanks.
So just to say, actually it's an open door. We in the Development Studies Association, which I'm a member of, I'm on the council, there are 2 positions for PhD students, we can't fill them. And yeah, we can't fill them. And when the students come in, they often don't get engaged, they don't get involved. So we had one, she was there for a year, then left. So these are positions that are available for you just for the asking. And so there is much that can be done. And within the university also, there are positions on each of these sort of subject bodies that you could get involved in. And they're usually just
your students' unions, are you council members, committee members, chairs?
Monica?
Yeah. What is the name of the society?
Development Studies Association.
And you said you came from the PGR?
No, PGR rep post.
So look for those opportunities. I mentioned earlier, like the book reviews, editor for journals, looking for that. So once you start doing your CV, you'll see where you might need to fill in some gaps, and then look for those opportunities so that you're not doing the same things over and over and then missing some elements. So it's really good to start looking for those opportunities now.
But you also have some, because certainly the field that I'm in, we have these what we call listservs, where it's like academic communities come together and they have these email lists, and we post a lot of job opportunities, book reviews, all kinds of things on there, and we have students that are loads of students that are part of it, and that's where they see the opportunities that come up. There are like several of them depending on your subject. So we go to join some of those so you can see when the opportunities come up.
Special interest groups, if you're a member, you don't need to be leading it at this stage.
No,
it just shows that you're getting actively involved in the academic community. So join those groups. Doesn't matter how small they are, just sort of join them so that you're part of it.
Things beyond academia, because I don't want to just be an academic. I want to be an activist. I want to be an activist because I do other things. I'm doing a conference at the weekend. So to me, it has to serve the general grassroots as well. To be in an ivory tower at my age is ridiculous.
I think many of us are now. We do a lot of things that are not academic. We're trustees on boards outside of academia. We are parts of community organizations. We do quite a lot, actually. And it helps that we are academics on there as well, because then we're the link, between.
I think that's where this kind of citizenship, civic stuff comes in, and universities are increasingly sort of expecting that as well. So that is important. I just wanted to sort of highlight, under awards and research funding, how scary that might seem. But if you get a small travel grant or an award to support your PhD field work or anything, it can be small. I've seen people, put £30 under awards or a travel award. Start listing those. As you get bigger and more prestigious funding, you can lose the smaller ones, but panels will know as an early career scholar that you need to start somewhere. And the fact is, especially if it's been a kind of competitive award, you've got that. So it is important to put those things down.
And it's also important to put it even if you don't get it, because what a lot of institutions want to see is that you're aware that there's an external funding landscape out there and that you are engaging with it and you're trying. So even if you don't get it, put that down. Put down that you've applied but you were unsuccessful. So put both down, where you are successful and where you are unsuccessful. and then slowly lose the ones where you're unsuccessful as you become more successful.
So the,
yeah, sorry, I just wanted to ask about the awards now.
Yeah.
I actually won one. I've been nominated.
yeah, nominations are good. Definitely put nominations, even if you don't win it. You say nominated or runner-up or you know, early career prizes, anything like that, and go for those opportunities. Don't wait for somebody to nominate you. Find out how people get nominated and put yourself forward. And if you can do it yourself, go for it.
What about minor things such as community bursaries?
Sorry, I couldn't hear.
What about minor things such as community bursaries?
Yes.
Those ones as well?
Yeah.
Community bursaries?
Commuter bursaries. So if you live really far away from the university, but you know, so that bursary kind of helps you with transportation.
I mean, just, you know, to start with, put those in, and then as you get sort of funding awards, you can then move those out. But it gives you something, as long as it's a competitively one thing that you've had to apply for and been awarded. It's awards, so if you've been awarded it, then you can put those in.
Sorry, I just have a question. I just wanted to clarify. So, did you mean that, like, let's say I won an award and I got monetary value for it, I should put down what the monetary value was?
Yes. Yeah, the monetary value and also the significance of that award. So if it was like an undergraduate prize for the best dissertation, that's really important to mention, or even the best essay, because that kind of continues in societies. You will have, you know, journals have an early career prize, and then associations will give awards. So you have to, you know, that's where they start. So it's important to mention those. So don't get daunted when it says research funding. It's not just big grants. It's putting those small awards in to start with. Any teaching experience, even if it's voluntary, you did a session for your supervisor, put that down, but be very, very clear that it was a one-off session and you didn't teach the whole module, because again, you see some examples where, you know, people have put, I taught on this module, that module. When you interview them, you find out it was a one-off, and then that doesn't go down very well. So it's just about being open and honest. But you did do it, and you can talk about sort of what you got from that experience. You can draw on that in your interview as well. Conferences, initially it will be attendance, but what you're building towards is the presentation of, obviously, papers at conferences. As PhD students, if you're not, you know, it's good to sort of think about presenting at small events. It doesn't have to be a major conference. It could be a seminar in your department to start with, a special interest group. So look for opportunities to present your research. And you could put conferences/seminars just to qualify it if they're not major conferences. Again, what panels will be looking for as you move up the ranks is major international conferences and keynotes at them. But to start with, it's expected that it will be sort of attendance and giving a paper at small events. And then your publications.
Sorry, just a quick question. Writing retreats, can that be put down? I've forgotten a few writing retreats in the PhD. Just to help you together.
So if it's about you just attending to help you develop, I think you could maybe write that as part of your kind of working with people in maybe the narrative. But if you're leading that or you've helped to set it up, I would definitely put that in your CV. So that's the big difference. So I'm just going to go back a couple of slides because I just wanted to stress that as early career researchers, you wouldn't. So when you see this CV on the table, you're not expected to fill all sections. So bear that in mind and don't get put off. That's, you know, that's for staff. So there's no expectation. It is expected that some of your sections will be blank, and panels are okay with that. As an early career researcher, don't fill it with unnecessary details. And if you're not sure, get some feedback from your supervisor or other people to say, you know, do you think this is the kind of thing I should include or not include? Cross-check that everything in your CV supports what you've said in your letter. Okay, make sure. And sometimes you might have missed something in your CV while you're writing your narrative. You realise, that should be in my CV. Make sure that everything matches up. And I mentioned this one before about putting full details, DOI numbers, the publication details, dates, venues of conferences, project dates, role titles, a brief description of the duties, so that it's evidence. That's the way to remember it, is that you're evidencing your claims. And then just again a reminder to tailor your CV to each job or role, and to the preferred kind of criteria that the institution is looking for. So your pitch is, always think of it as a pitch. You're pitching your CV to that particular role or post. So where I want to end now is I just found this online. This is the job criteria for a postdoctoral research assistant. So it gives you what they're looking for. This was, it's one that was out recently. Gives you an idea of the kinds of areas of work that they're looking for in terms of research, and also contribution to research group and universities. So they're looking for researchers who've already been making some contribution. You remember, it's the scholarly activities or the membership of an academic community. Think of the various ways in which you could demonstrate that through all the things that you've done. So it's thinking now about pitching to a job description. So you might want to take a picture of this, and then what we want you to do now is we've set some tables up in the other room, I think for about 3 groups in there, and then some of you can be in here. What we want you to do now is look at your CVs, give each other some feedback, suggestions of what you think, given what you've heard today, give a bit of feedback on how each other's CV looks, how you could improve your CV, or suggestions for improvement, and what else you could sort of include. So give each other some feedback now, and we'll come round and
how long?
So what time?